when you look at the possible matchup with Joker.
He'll get his ass roasted by the Joker.
To get healthy, and this is the time to get healthy. But
kill him, Shaq. Kill Shaq in the post, Joker. Kill him softly.
Charles Barkley didn't just say Nikola Jokic would beat Shaq. He said he would cook him. But most people immediately dismiss that as a joke, because when you think of Shaq, you think of dominance. But what if the problem isn't what Shaq was, but who Jokic is? And when you look at who Jokic is becoming, you start to wonder, was Charles Barkley totally right about Nikola Jokic? Or is this one of those debates people aren't ready to have yet?
Everybody else is done playing. He's at 5 and he's not finished.
So he's gonna be number 1.
We don't
See?
know.
So hey, he's at 5.
You know what he's trying to do? Like we know the difference between Shaq.
No, you know.
And Jokic.
No, you.
Right now, Nikola Jokic is already being placed in conversations that people are not comfortable with. Top 5 centers of all time. That seems a little too high too soon, especially when you realize that it's not even debatable.
With Nikola being at 5 and me never seeing Will play, we can go Kareem, Shaq.
You seen Kareem play?
Hakeem. No, Hakeem. I said, listen to the words that I just said, nigga.
You said you
I ain't never seen them play, and I'll give you a list of top 5 centers. Wilt, Kareem, Shaq, Hakeem, and Nikola.
That silence says everything about how most people feel about Jokic, because we all agree he's great. But placing him next to Shaq? That feels different. That feels like crossing a line. You see, Shaq was overwhelming. He imposed his will on the game in a way that made you feel it. But Jokic does the opposite. He slows the game down, makes the right read, and scores without forcing it. But here's the part most people miss. It's when the game is over that you'll realize that he just controlled an entire game without forcing it. So, when people compare the two, it doesn't feel natural. It feels wrong. But that's exactly why this debate matters. Because once you stop comparing how they look and start comparing how they actually play, you begin to realize that this isn't a disrespectful comparison. It's a very real one. And once you accept that, everything Charles Barkley said starts to sound a lot less crazy. When Charles Barkley says Jokic would cook Shaq, he is not just throwing out a hot take for entertainment. He is speaking from something he actually watched happen in real time.
So he was killing you in the post, too. He was jump hooking you and shaking bacon you.
And guess what?
Not chicken shaking bacon.
And guess what?
So who's Chuck talking about here?
But Ernie, historically, nobody has ever beaten me shooting jumpers. Only one guy's beat me shooting jumpers, and that was Hakeem Olajuwon.
Hakeem Olajuwon did not go through Shaq. He went around him, using footwork, touch, and jumpers to turn every possession into a problem Shaq could not solve. But contrary to what Shaq said, it was not just Hakeem that beat him. Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, and other skilled bigs found success by pulling him into situations where his physical dominance no longer mattered. Now this is where the conversation shifts from history to reality, because the players who gave Shaq problems with jumpers and finesse were great, but Nikola Jokic is operating on an entirely different level of efficiency in those exact same areas. From the mid-range, Jokic is shooting over 50% on high volume, which is significantly higher than what players like Ewing were able to sustain against Shaq. Around the rim, he is converting over 70% of his attempts, not through athleticism, but through positioning, timing, and touch that very few players in NBA history have ever had. So if Hakeem and Ewing could give Shaq problems with jumpers and footwork, then Charles Barkley is totally right. The Joker would cook Shaq. Not because Shaq was not dominant, but because this is the one style of play that historically gave him the most trouble. And Nikola Jokic has turned that exact style into a science. But it gets worse for Shaq when you think about the modern game. However, we have more to offer in our basketball community. So don't just watch, Be a part of it. Join our membership today and get early access to videos and level up with discounted merch. Anyway, here's Shaq talking about the modern game and the bigs.
The modern day big joker, those guys, Joel, Wemby. I'm jealous of them. I'm jealous of them because I wish I was allowed to do that. I wish I could step out and shoot the three, brother.
Now, first of all, you don't know who Shaq was in his playing days if you don't believe that the reason he didn't step out to shoot threes is because someone didn't permit him. He simply didn't bother with threes because he couldn't even get his free throws right. Secondly, in today's game, Nikola Jokic brings something that Shaq never had to deal with, and that's spacing. Back in Shaq's time, he basically lived in the paint. He protected the rim, controlled the interior, and forced teams to deal with his presence inside. But Jokic does not meet you there. He pulls you out.
Playing one-on-one, he wouldn't post me up. He would go to the pick and roll. I would have to help on Jamal Murray, give him some freedom so he could hit that shot.
This is clearly where Jokic becomes impossible because we all know he is not just scoring. He is reading everything. And that is why his numbers do not just look impressive. They look completely different from what we're used to seeing from a center. And even Shaq knows that.
Listen, he's dominating. We just saw the thing. He's leading in triple-doubles, rebounding, and assists. Our last 31 games, there's 16.
A center leading in assists, controlling the offense, and turning every possession into a decision tree for the defense. That is something Shaq never had to guard. And at the same time, it highlights the other side of the problem. Because while Jokic is stretching the floor, creating shots for others, and operating from everywhere on the court, Shaq's limitations start to show more clearly. He could not space the floor. He could not punish defenses from the perimeter. And at the free throw line, teams could literally turn his greatest strength into a weakness. And that's why a matchup against the Joker is not just difficult for Shaq, it is fundamentally different from anything he ever had to face. Once you move beyond just jumpers and layups, the gap between Nikola Jokic and Shaquille O'Neal does not shrink. It actually widens. Because the real problem is not just that Jokic can score from everywhere on the floor. The real problem is that he controls everything. Against the Joker, Shaq is no longer just sitting comfortably in the paint waiting to dominate. He is being dragged into unfamiliar territory. And that's why when Shaq was first asked about the hypothetical matchup, at first he went with his ego.
2001 Shaq, 2025 Jokic, what happens?
Slavian chicken, wherever he's from.
Slovenian chicken?
Slovenian chicken.
But after some time and thought, he changed his tone.
Our playoffs probably be 40, 14 rebounds, 3 blocks. He's a different player. I probably wouldn't have stopped him either.
I probably wouldn't have stopped him either. That line is why it's debatable even from a Shaq fan perspective. At the end of the day, there's no doubt that Shaq would get his numbers. However, Jokic would control the game. And when control meets dominance, control usually wins. But even if you don't agree with that, deep down everyone knows that this is, at the very least, debatable.
A guy like him, Ernie, you got to make him play defense.
I'm trying to hear you, Shaq, but there's just been
you just gotta make
heckling over here.
Ernie really wasn't interested in anything Shaq had to say at that point, because at the end of the day, a Jokic vs. Shaq matchup is an uncomfortable debate. And when Charles Barkley said the Joker would cook Shaq, it didn't seem impossible. Because while Shaquille O'Neal represents the most dominant physical force the NBA has ever seen, Nikola Jokic represents something entirely different. He represents a version of basketball where intelligence beats explosiveness, where efficiency beats volume, and where making the right play every single time becomes more dangerous than any one move. Charles Barkley saw that clearly, even if people did not want to hear it. But how about you? Do you agree with Chuck? Let us hear your thoughts about the debate. But if you want to see another moment where a legend was completely right about a superstar before everyone else caught on, watch. Kobe Bryant was totally right about Steph Curry. Next.